Myself. The topic today is lessons learned and business case for rapid RPA. I would like to welcome Lee Ward. She is EGM for business commercialization at one of the leading infrastructure and facility management organization. They're a global company with offices around the globe. Lee was earlier part of Unisys and IBM, and also helping the government of NSW in her previous roles. I would like to invite Lee to speak about her experiences, what she has done in her role as AGM at the leading company, and her journey for the RPA over the last 12 months. I would like to invite Lee to come and speak and share her journey. Just to be clear on the agenda for today's webinar, we have got four sessions. One is Lee's presentation discussing about her journey of what, why, and how of rapid RPA. Then business case for that. What was her lessons learned? And the fourth, the most important component, is the questions which we have received from the various participants for this webinar. I would now like to invite Lee to come and start, share her experience in this presentation and webinar. Lee?
Thanks, Mo. And it's great to be here, and it really is good to share experiences, and thank you to Mindfields for having these webinars, because I look forward in the future to hearing other people talk about their journey as well, because I think it's something as new as RPA we all learn together. So firstly, how did we get to this point of rapid RPA? My role is actually on a revenue generating side of the business. So business commercialisation is about creating new offerings that we can take to our clients. So how did I end up in RPA is quite an interesting journey. As I was looking at how we would commercialise some of the things that we do today for clients, and that might be procurement, supply chain management, workers' compensation, could be any number of things. I had to have a look at the cost structure in the business, and when I looked at the cost structure, a few things became apparent to me: that we would have to get a much more competitive cost structure in order to be able to sell these services. We'd have to make sure there were no errors or rework, because clients won't tolerate that. And we'd have to bring down the duration of some of the processes to be competitive. So all of that, looking at the delivery model of how we did things, made me go and research, well, what is best practice at the moment around business processes, essentially. And that led me very rapidly into RPA about 12 months ago. And we spent quite a bit of time researching what was happening in this area. 12 months ago, it was very different to even now. There were some early adopters out there. There were papers being written. There was lots of information from various suppliers. And being able to cut through that and understand what was the sales hype in some cases and what was really happening was quite challenging. So I think I researched about between 30 and 40 different companies that said they were in RPA. So that's how we started. Our culture is a bit different, and it may be different to other companies, and I recognise that. I think in some ways I'm fortunate in that we have a culture which I call first, fail fast. So we've got a culture of learning. So go into something new, don't take the highest risk you can take in that area, but fail and learn really quickly. And the second step then is to learn, adapt and deliver. So after 4 months of going through and putting 5 processes through automation and through UAT, I think we probably have the credentials to talk about lessons learned, because we've had some failures along the way. And that's good, because we can move, I think, quicker than if we'd taken, say, 12 months to do that, and the lessons coming out of it would have been a lot slower. But I think the art is in what you choose to actually automate is very important.
So now I will ask audience a poll, regarding what they think. What was the source of their information when they started this thing, starting the journey in the RPA? and we'd like to understand what was your experience, what was the source of information regarding the RPA. Do you go to research firms, internet, white papers? So Lee, what was your experience? You searched on the internet, advisory
I did
firms?
every one of those. I spoke to anybody who would talk to me globally, and that means doing some weird time zones from this end of the earth. But certainly, as well as the software and the services vendors, talking to the advisory companies out there on what they're seeing, they've got a point of view, which is important. I spoke to the Institute for RPA, and then trying to triangulate the information, because when something is new, it's very confusing what information is out there, and trying to get some structure around what people are thinking and why they're thinking it is really important. That sort of led us to understand that vendors were very hungry in this space, and that did lead us down a path that we wanted to use somebody independent, and that's why we got to Mindfields, because your name kept coming up both in the research and from the advisory firms as being independent, and we really needed that to cut through what was actually happening in the marketplace and to chart a course for our company, because a lot of the research out there is from the early adopters, which is largely banking, finance, insurance, and good reason for them to be early adopters. But we didn't have a lot of case studies that were very similar to us. So we needed some help understanding what would actually work in our environment.
Thanks, Lee. I think I will just also share the results of the poll. And as per the polls, I think it is mostly DIY, do it yourself through internet, and which is quite obvious, because I think currently the consulting firms, if you can Google something on the internet, you don't require consulting firms.
Yeah.
So they are here for the items which are non-Googleable. So I think the next step, the next option here is sales pitch from sales provider as per the poll answer. I think that is also a good source of information, but it depends upon how they're pitching it or packaging it. They're incumbent vendors, or they're the vendors who are not present in your organization. I think you have the same experience, and as part of your journey, I think you will discuss that also going forward.
Yeah, that's right.
So, like, going back to your presentation now, so we
Okay, so where I got to was, and this may be completely different to some other companies, that's why I think it's interesting, is I actually looked at RPA as a differentiator in what we could do in commercialisation. So my vision was, not only did we need to get our internal cost structure down, but then I would be able to take that as a competency to our clients in our efforts to commercialise some of the services and get away from expensive integration or even deployment of APIs, and use RPA as a differentiator, both to do it more efficiently or more cheaply, but also to get that speed that clients are often looking for. So we engaged with Mindfields firstly to do a high-level study of our internal processes and to come up with a business case together with us, but we constrained it essentially to what we call the business services part of the business, which is very broad. It's broader than what some people might include in business services. And then we wanted to complete a proof of concept.
So, Lee, how did you execute the rapid RPA?
Quickly. So, like I said, we wanted to get the lessons learned. So we were very careful working with Mindfields to make sure that we chose processes that weren't, if we didn't do it right the first time, going to break the company or affect the stock price. So you've got to choose processes that you can actually learn on, and that there is a plan that if you perhaps don't get it right the first time, and you have to have a couple of goes at it, the business can continue. So you don't want to break the business if you're going to take this approach. So it does bring you down more to a subset of processes. But you learn very quickly, because you've now got, and I was very fortunate to report to a chief executive who likes this approach, but I've got permission to actually test the boundaries and to fail and recover. Now, I can't fail twice the same way. I've got to learn from it. But that's a really, I think, quite different approach in terms of being able to test what you can actually do, where you get the best return in the business, and where perhaps you might lead to second or third place. So, yes.
So Lee, your organization is quite a lean organization.
Yes.
You have already outsourced and offshored some component of your business process and also your IT infrastructure.
Yes.
So what was your strategy? Did you went to them for some solution on an RPA?
I did. I most certainly did consult with them. I think, when you have incumbent suppliers, you definitely consult with them. They should be bringing you thought leadership in that space. And so we have one supplier that does all of our IT, and we have another supplier, both are Indian offshorers, and they both do it offshore, that does some of our business processes. So I met with both of them and asked for their point of view around RPA. It very, very quickly got out into the marketplace what we were doing, and I had a queue at my door of people who wanted business in the RPA space. So just about anybody you can mention was queuing up to come and tell me their story as well. And that's when it did become very confusing, because different people were coming from different places around how they would do RPA and what their point of view was. And that's absolutely why we felt we had to have somebody that was at arm's length from all of the vendors until we could get clarity around what we had to do.
Yeah. So Lee, I will just take a pause and do one more poll here to understand from the audience, like, are there incumbent service providers proactive in offering RPA solutions to them, or what route they take to select a partner in the journey for the RPA? And there are a lot of consulting firms also, like Big Fours coming into this play. They have got very comprehensive suite of offering, change management, risk management. So what are your views about them? Do you think they provide comprehensive solution, but it also impacts your budget or timelines?
Yeah, there are a lot of players out there, and I've spoken to all of them. So I think what I was after was, I didn't want to be one of many clients they were talking to. I preferred to have a more personalised approach, and I feel that we were important to Mindfields. And I think sometimes you don't get that with some of the bigger companies. I felt that I was queuing up, and in one case I was actually given a time frame of 4 months before they could actually start, and that just wasn't acceptable to me, that I knew I was in a queue of clients to actually start. So different people are going to approach it different ways, and this is an interesting question, because I didn't find that our incumbents were proactive in bringing forward RPA solutions, but they were responsive when I raised it. So for companies that aren't even started on this journey, I will keep that in mind, that don't necessarily think that it's going to be brought to you, because I think in the case of incumbents, they are trying to figure out how they fit into this whole RPA space, and that can be quite a journey for them as well.
Thank you, Lee, for your insights. I think it is in sync with what we got from the polling from the participants for this webinar. I think 50% have not received proactive offering from their incumbent providers, 30% have received it, and 20% are indifferent. I think it's so similar with your experience to some extent, but I would like to you to continue your presentation now. So.
Okay, let's bring it up. So after all the fairy dust settled, and we tried to figure out from all the information that's available, from all the different sources, what we were going to do next. So step 3 for us was we broke the program down into a set of phases, and this really comes back to our change management approach and how we get people to go on a journey. So our culture likes to see results at regular intervals. So breaking it down into phases just works with the culture. Rather than people having to wait 12 months to see anything, we chose to do smaller chunks of work, and in this case 5 processes, so that we could show in 3 to 4 months some progress, and people got experience that way. And we made videos of these processes so we could show them what we were doing along the way, and that's really part of change management. The robots are not hard to manage, the people are hard to manage. So it's a really critical part of making this actually work. So we settled on these 5 processes: employee onboarding, vendor reconciliation, support resource allocations. That's a really popular one. Everyone loves allocations, so we just automate it, and then we say, if you've got a question, ask the robot. External debtors aging, and the last one is my favourite, and we are going to do a video on this one because this one is a front office one, and we came across this one sort of as we were getting the program up and running. And what it is, in our business, we do a lot of catering for various companies and departments, and a lot of them are very distributed. So we have to move information from an application called JMix, we have to move it into SAP, and we've automated that, and we've also, most importantly, automated the goods receipting, so that the chefs, who I can tell you are completely disinterested in doing goods receipting, can actually get that done by the robots, and then the vendors get paid and everybody's happy. And what we were finding was that the vendors weren't getting paid because the goods receipting was not being done, and the chefs were putting the goods receipts, under their iPad that's got the recipe on it, and the vendors weren't getting paid, they were putting us on stock credit, so the whole thing was not going well. So that to me is a really good process. Now, if we had done that and it didn't work the first time, and in this case it did because we had a really good engagement with the business, then nothing would have broken. We just would have continued the way we were, limping along. But this to me is a really good example of how you can make a difference to people in your business, working in the field, that are touching your end customer, making a better life for your suppliers. So that's why we want to make a video of that and make that one in particular available for people to see.
So Lee, what is your strategy when you make a video of this process which has been automated? You're getting ideas from the operational people or from the top senior management? What is? It
can be both, but generally, I don't think it's to be a surprise to people. The people who know the most about the business are the people that are doing the business. So you generally get really good ideas when you go out and talk to people in the field that are actually doing things, and they know the pain points and what's not working and how they have to, rework something. If you're at an executive level, it's very hard to see that. It's just the nature of business. But you do get ideas all through the company. I find procurement and supply chain in particular, because they sit in the middle of everything, they don't own the people doing the processes, but they can see when processes are not working, and often when they don't work, the pain comes back to them. So if vendors are not getting paid on time, they call procurement. So they get to fix it up. So they know where the pain points are in processes, and it's good to find that in an organisation. So don't necessarily go only to the people doing the work, go to the people who can see the problems.
So Lee, can I ask you one thing, that what was your driver to pick JMix? Was it to reduce the cost, increase the efficiency, or increase the customer or client satisfaction, UX, CX? What was the main driver?
Well, there's a couple of drivers in there. It was clear that we had the head chef and his chefs doing work that it'd be much better use of their time to be looking at nutrition and recipes and sourcing ingredients than it would be to be doing goods receipting. We also had a major problem in that if vendors are putting us on stock credit, we can't actually buy the ingredients. So our own worst enemy, if you're not doing the goods receipting and they're not getting paid, then you don't get the next delivery. And it is terribly hard to negotiate a better price if you're not paying your bills on time. So you can see how there's no intention not to pay them, but a process is getting in the way of all of that flowing. So we needed to increase the speed of the overall process. We needed to automate it so that we got the chefs doing what chefs do and we get the robots doing what they can do.
So this also brings us to one more question for polling, is that what are your drivers for rapid RPA? Do you want to do it for cost pressures, immediate results, process efficiencies, or reduction in errors? So I will appreciate to understand your views on that. And Lee, just coming back to your drivers, you know, putting an RP is a costly initiative. You have your bandwidth, you have other senior management's bandwidth, then it is a big expectations on your shoulder from you to achieve those numbers. So how you manage that stakeholder internally from the business side and from the cost side, and every business is under cost pressures. So when you come with a non-cost pressure driver, how you convince the stakeholders?
Well, the processes we chose had a positive return within 6 months. So we ended up, we broke even, and that part of that is because we learnt along the way and we had to adjust course, but we broke even. And that's a pretty good outcome for anything that touches technology. But we were completely transparent in the entire business case process. Now, some of this caused us a bit of pain in terms of validation of the business case, revalidation of the business case, make sure they're double sure, triple sure that the savings are there, and that was a bit of a painful process to go through. But it is about getting people to buy in along the way. So that was really important to us, to take people on a journey. Regular communication, and we all know we can't do too much communication, but going back to them, how are we going with the automation, checking in with them. We did a lot of that. We probably would do it differently again going forward. I think we're a little bit too collaborative along the way. And that took a bit too much, I think, time and energy away from what we really wanted to do. But that's part of the learning, because you've got to manage the change in the organisation, not just the robots.
I think your views are in sync with most of the audience. So 45% are driving the cost pressure is the reason, and same is with the process efficiencies. I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah.
Because in the first rapid RPA, what we have experienced is that you can't take out the human element totally. So the cost remains of the human element to some extent. Partially, so the cost pressures or the drivers are there, but the major thing is to have more efficiency. And during the course of the time, that human element can be upgraded to do more value-added stuff than doing a routine things.
Yeah, another approach we actually took to that, because with automating a lot of these processes, you take out what I call arms and legs. You don't take out a whole role, but when you actually have attrition in your team, just natural attrition, you use that as the trigger point to reorganise the work so you do get the cost out. So I don't think that this is at a stage where it's, in our business anyway, about taking whole teams out or anything like that. I think we can cope with just natural attrition and moving people to new opportunities in different parts of the business.
So it means that you're redeploying the human effort released from any process which has been automated to other process.
Absolutely.
So you're upgrading them to next level.
Yes.
So coming back to your steps, you broke them into small pieces, and then you take forward in a phased manner. So what are the other drivers, other things you have considered in doing your journey for rapid RPA?
So the other things that we've considered, well, we're planning phase 2 and phase 3 right now. So we're looking at what do you do next. And some of the processes we have partially done. So if you look at support resource allocations, we did 3 of 10. So we'll now do 10 of 10. So there's a different approach on how we're going to do. I mean, phase 2 and phase 3 to me should be even faster. Right? So we've had, the luxury in a business of doing phase 1, of learning, of failing, of adjusting course. We had to do all of the infrastructure set up, and that in itself is quite a big task, which I think when you read a lot of the stuff that's out there on the internet, particularly from the software vendors, is underestimated. That is quite significant what you need to do to set up. So that will be behind us. So that should run like clockwork, you would hope, and we can get on with just doing more automation.
So Lee, you have done this 5 process in 4 months' time, less than 4 months' time. I will say less than 3 months' time if you take out management of different type of vendors which are doing in your ecosystem. So do you think phase 2 and phase 3 will be less than this 3 months' time?
Okay, so phase 2 is scheduled for 6 months, but it's a lot more processes.
Okay.
So it's a different way of attacking it. So we'll put more in there and we'll take 6 months to do it all. Now, along the way, processes get automated. So it's not that you're waiting right to the end of 6 months to see something. You need, I think, in our culture, to drip feed. You've got to show progress all the time. So you want to be able to have it as a program and keep people interested. And while they're interested, they're always saying, well, what about this? And you say, okay, phase 3 is coming up. We're going to put that in phase 3. Or we have a parking lot when we don't know what to do at all. At this stage, you say, put that in the parking lot. So people know there's a placeholder somewhere for their idea. And I think that's really important in terms of managing the people through this.
Okay. And so I have experience with other clients and other companies who have taken the RPA journey. They take at least 6 to 9 months to do a POC and go live in at least 9 months after. So what makes you different by doing in just 3 or 4 months in this particular case?
Okay.
So can you just explain how you do it?
Yeah. So firstly, the proof of concepts that we did were interesting, but they didn't uncover the issues that we actually had. So, and the issues that we had was not that the software was not going to work. The software works, you can automate things. So I don't think a proof of concept should be testing that. Where we had issues was actually around the data input and checking that we could actually access it, we could read it. And we had one where the business very naively, and not naively, but I think this is their understanding of data, said it's in a PDF, and when we went to look at the PDF from a third-party company, that was encrypted, and we couldn't get it unencrypted. So we would spend more time, if we were doing a proof of concept again, testing the external environment, that it works in a Citrix environment, that it can be accessed from India, that the data is all able to be read, and a lot less time looking at the actual software tool, because I think you can pretty well assume that most of these software tools will work. So that was one of our learnings around the proof of concept. Then when we went to select the process, as I said earlier, we didn't select something that's going to bring the company down or that's going to affect the stock price if it doesn't work. We chose processes that would give us a return but weren't so critical they were going to hurt us if we got it wrong.
So when you select the process, so you're saying, like as we discussed the definition of rapid RPA, they were simple to moderate.
Yep.
They were not customer facing or revenue impacting too much, like not critical to the organization, not material impact on the organization.
Yeah. But they made a difference. Yeah.
So the drivers was to make a difference and show how automation can change
the
culture.
But in a safe way, because we did find a couple of cases where people have been doing processes for so long and using macros, for example, that didn't work. So they were getting the wrong results, and I just said to them, if you've been living with the wrong results all this time, do you really need any results at all? Now, there's no point in automating something that doesn't make a difference. So in some cases, we found that, and we actually said, you really just should stop doing that, not automate it.
So after 30 days of doing, I remember we were engaged for the first 30 days.
Yes.
We identified 30 processes. We gave a range of saving per process, did a proof of concept. So what was the next decision at the stakeholder level which you convinced them or put forward to them for the next part of the journey?
Well, we presented that business case to the steering committee and it was approved. So it was a positive business case. But we worked through, we had this high-level view of these processes and we settled on a smaller number of processes to do. And I think that gets back to also our culture of showing more results quicker. So the processes are there, but they're between phase 1 and phase 2.
And what are the lessons learned? I'm just trying to jump a bit early, the lessons learned, because but I think like at this stage, looking at your phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 timelines, what were the lessons learned in phase 1 which will make phase 2 much more efficient?
Right. I think one of them is up there. The first one was we took a really nice collaborative approach. So we tolerated BRDs not being complete, process document not being completed. We said, we'll just work through that with you, because we were trying to ease people into this. That actually didn't work that well. So because how long is a piece of string? We just kept going back and back and back. So this time we're spending more time acting as consultants on the BRD and sitting with them and making sure that is right before a single line of code is ever written. So I guess it's probably like project management, 80% is in the planning and 20% in the execution. So we've modified our approach as a result of phase 1, and we're just switching our focus to actually helping the business. We're still there to help, but let's get the input right before we start trying to code it, so we don't get into a recoding or a situation where you sit there and the exceptions are coming out in every meeting as a sort of continuous stream of, when we really needed that documented up front. You can handle 1 or 2, but, sometimes it was getting quite out of hand in terms of the number of exceptions that were coming up after that. So that's the biggest thing we will change in our approach.
And what about taking business with you in the first phase and second phase and third phase? How is the reaction of business changing, positively, negatively, indifferent?
Right. Well, I think we've been really fortunate. Along the way, we've had people put up their hands by themselves and say, we want to be advocates for this. And that's just like the most pleasing result you can have from a change management point of view. So those people you just grab hold of and you nurture. They're your advocates in the business. Go forward and tell everybody else. And you have people that are fence sitters, and you've got to move them along. And you do have your naysayers. You have people that just are resistant to change. And you try and move the dial a bit with those people, and you've got to try different tacks, different ways of seeing how you can get through to them. A lot of time it can be that they've got a different view of, the number of people I have is how important I am, or the bigger budget I have. And so you won't necessarily change everyone, but if you can move them to at least be a fence sitter, that's good. But your advocates, treasure them, make them into heroes, get them to make videos, get them exposed in the organisation, because that's also good for their career. They're seen by senior executives as people who are making a difference, who are adopting technology and driving the organisation further. So it's a win-win if you can find those people.
Very interestingly, because every business owners in the current environment are after their own KPIs. And if you can help them meet their KPIs by automating the process, by releasing the cost or efficiency, they feel involved and motivated.
Yes.
Any views on that?
I have, but it's a little bit of a two-edged sword. So if it's only cost, it gets mixed up with, because we're so heavily offshored, then RPA sounds a bit hard, I'll just offshore it. So we have come up with a bit of a mantra that I'm using with our offshore players is, you need to be with me on this journey, but we will RPA first and we will offshore the residual to you. So you will get more work out of the processes that we currently don't offshore or outsource if you work with me on this strategy. And we're doing that now, so we're moving also from an FTE-based model to an outcomes-based model. So they will get more work if they follow this strategy. If they follow the old strategy of just, I'm going to make a land grab and offshore stuff, they won't get more work. So that, again, is a win-win, working with your outsourcing and offshore partner to make sure that they can see that as their work declines in their current contract, that they can pick up new work to backfill it.
Yeah, I think it's a very good strategy, because they're also your partners. If by automating the offshore work or reducing the revenue, as a partner, you should also make sure that they can sustain themselves
Yes.
and give them more work,
Yes.
but at the right pricing. I think it's a very smart strategy.
Yeah.
So I think thanks, Lee, for your continuing speaking for last half an hour. There's 2 minutes break for you, and we'll ask one more poll from the audience. Is what do you perceive or have experienced the biggest hurdle in your RPA journey for the companies who have started the journey or companies who are in the process of starting the journey? What has been the biggest hurdle for your journey till now? Is it a maturity of RPA tool landscape? Because I know a couple of the vendors or the organizations are still comprehensive about the maturity of RPA tools, security, password controls, or what is the business case for using them, the internal organization dynamics, or the trade unions. So Lee, what are your views on these hurdles as such?
I think the biggest hurdle for us is, well, there's two. One is understanding what the tool does and what it doesn't do. So we're not at the end game right now. We're at the start of this journey. And I think there's a temptation to say, when I automate a process, I'll automate end to end. That was one of our lessons. Don't do that. Automate what you can. Leave your people in the bit that's too hard and let the technology catch up. It will catch up. So just go after what you can get. Go after the low-hanging fruit. Organisational dynamics, I can't stress enough how much you have to manage people through this. That's really important to move forward.
Yes, I will share the result, and it is in sync with, again, your perception that the dynamics in the organization are the biggest hurdle as perceived by the participant of this webinar.
Yeah.
And I can also share my experience with my other clients who are doing this journey with us, that dynamics can change things very dramatically. At one of our clients, we're doing it in 3 days. We're doing a POC because they're very proactive. Everything is ready for us. At one client, it's have taken more than 1 month to even get access to the IT systems. So I think their views of the audience is totally spot on. And do you want to add your 2 cents on your expert views on this particular?
Well, I mean, it is interesting, the whole IT environment. So, and we've sort of done a full circle of IT just didn't really want to be involved at all and just saw this as automation like they'd done in IT years ago. When they started to understand it more, they started to get more involved, and we probably needed them involved, but we stumbled along the way. So I think taking them on the journey was a little bit harder because they are experts in what they do. They were less likely to listen to business people who were saying, well, we think this is different and new technology. And it took a little while to get through that. In a heavily outsourced environment, we don't have a lot of retained knowledge in the company. So that is a bit problematic as well, in that we were trying to navigate some internal organisations and our external partners, particularly around architecture, security, system design. It was more than one partner that we were trying to navigate.
So Lee, comes to the third session of our webinar today. What was your lessons learned in your whole RPA, rapid RPA journey in last 6 months? Can you share your experience again?
Yeah, so I've shared a couple along the way around the importance of doing the work up front. As I said, we're heavily outsourced. Not everybody on the phone will be, but that just means that you have more stakeholders that have different needs that you've got to manage through this particular process. I do empathise with them because I've spent 30 years working for service providers. I know that a change like this, whether it's moving to the cloud or whether it's RPA, means that they need to adjust their business model. So they need some time to do that. But I'm starting to see the signs that they're starting to understand where their role can be in helping companies RPA, including existing clients, not just new clients, and what role they'll play in that, so they don't feel as threatened. That's really important. They need to find their way. As I said, we've got little IT knowledge retained, so we had some gaps in what we had to go and do, and we had to fill those gaps. We had to find our way around who was going to help us with each of these particular problems, even down to BCP considerations. We do move fast, so at the end of October we announced we would move SAP into the cloud by Christmas. So we've now had another 2 months of a major change in our organisation, and of course that affects the RPA program as well, because we need to know how to interface with SAP in the cloud. So you've got these environmental things going on and going on quite quickly in our environment. And so you've got to adjust course. You have to take the changes, and you need to be able to adapt to what's actually happening. I would say though, if you have the luxury of retaining RPA in-house when it's brand new, I would do that, because I think you take a lot of this complexity out. So rather than having to work with internal and 2 offshore providers, if you have the luxury of having a self-contained centre of competency in-house that you can control while this is still so very new, I will do that.
So Lee, what do you think is the right time to have the COE set up in your organisation? Before rapid RPA, after rapid RPA, first phase, second phase, third phase, what do you think is the right timing of that COE, if you can afford?
Well, I think it comes back to the business case and whether your organisation has an appetite to see an investment in the COE up front. Ours didn't, so it's sort of incrementally build it. So at the end of phase 1, we'll have certain competencies. At the end of phase 2, we'll have more. But we're reliant on our business partners putting that competency in place.
So, Lee, what are the other lessons learned? This is mostly focused towards your service providers.
Mm-hmm. Right, so other lessons, I've called them scars in this case. Take all the hype that you read on the internet, thank you Google, and halve it. And then your expectations are probably right in terms of what I think you really do save. Because most of the savings that are quoted are only on the actual process automation versus what it takes to actually do the process. They don't take into account any of the setup or the ongoing maintenance or the changes that you need to do afterwards. So there is another bucket of cost that I think, when I get to the bottom of it, is not included in a lot of that hype. Spend time to inform and educate people on RPA. I can't stress this enough, and get rid of the robot language. I don't know who called this RPA. I wish they hadn't. And there are other names out there like intelligent process automation. Gartner at one stage were using phantom RPA, which completely even threw me as to why you would call it that. But just get rid of that language and bring it back to really basics when you're communicating with people about what you're trying to do. And I think we have much better success when we talk in plain English with the business and we pitch it at the level they're at, then we try and use technical language or smart language that sounds, trendy. So I'd be very conscious of that. The chart I put up, and there's a few of these around, but I put up the HFS chart, which shows RPA right at the start of a journey. So don't oversell what RPA is. It's incredibly important. It can drive a lot of benefits in business, but it's not nirvana. It's only one step in the journey. So be, I think, realistic in terms of what it delivers to the business, but paint the picture that there are these other really exciting technologies, the artificial intelligence and cognitive computing, and that in itself, when you start using that language, will confuse the business. So try and find simple language, but it's only the start, and we're going to progressively add to this in the coming years and add more benefit to the business. But if you can explain that in English, for example, I think the new Amazon supermarket's a great example that people can relate to of using artificial intelligence, because everybody goes to a supermarket. Well, most people go to a supermarket. Maybe you don't know. But they can relate to that. I walk in, I grab things, I walk out. There's all this technology that's completely invisible, but there's no checkouts. Use simple language and make sure they understand it's a journey, not a destination at this point in time.
I think very well said, Lee. I will just go to your first point, take all the hype and halve it. but your senior management, your stakeholders are also getting the information from the internet.
Yes.
So they also have that expectations of a hype. How you manage that?
Yeah, so Dr. Google's good at that, building the hype, by just having that conversation with them and saying, look, you know, because this is new, these viewpoints get very excited in the industry. So let's set our expectations, you know, at a realistic level, because the business case will still stack up. But let's not, you know, cut ourselves off at the knee the first time we do a business case. Let's just be realistic about what we will get. And if it's better, that's fantastic. We'll build that into phase 2. And that's one of the benefits of doing it in smaller chunks, is that you can adjust your business case along the way. If you get another 20%, fantastic. If you don't, then you're more realistic.
I think I would like to add one more thing here, Lee, that during the process, when you started the journey and when we went live into production, there was also change of ownership.
That was interesting.
Yeah, because if your company was acquired by a global player.
Yes.
And what was their reviews? Because I'm not sure, are we Australia ahead, or that Europe is ahead, US is ahead? So what was their thought process? What was their views on this RPA project?
Well, a couple of things happened when we had a hostile takeover. Our accounting rules changed. So there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. You just need to do your business case under the new accounting rules, which is really around what can be capitalised and how it gets amortised. So that is what it is. They've actually got a program around machine learning. So it wasn't completely out of kilter, but we haven't yet connected up well enough to get the benefits here. Our CFO, though, did go across to India, and I would say that our offshore partners did an excellent job of making sure he fully understands RPA. Now, it's in their best interest, but, you know, that's really great, because I now have a CFO who holds all the purse strings who gets this. And that's tremendously powerful, and he's obviously well connected into our new owners. So I think we will see that the momentum picks up, and we'll bring together what our owner does and what we do. And I think there's complete synergy there, but you've got to connect it up.
Oh, excellent. I think so. You were doing a dual management of dual owners. It's quite tough, I think so. So I think we're coming to the last. Thank you, Lee, for sharing your journey of your RPA, how, what, and why. It was very insightful, and I think the audience must have enjoyed it. So we are seeing the number of attenders going up, not coming down, which is quite different, because generally people start leaving the webinar during the end part of the session, but I'm seeing them increasing, they're not going down. So it's a positive sign. So now we'll come to the most critical part for which everybody is waiting, is the questions. So can we start straight to the questions? And we have got 25 questions. So we have got 10 minutes left.
Yep.
So 30 seconds rapid fire question answers.
Rapid Q&A. Well, some of these I've covered. So the process is, I think you go for rapid RPA. Don't break the company. Go for the ones that will make a difference, because if you're not making a difference, you probably shouldn't be doing it at all. But they're relatively safe in terms of if you have to do it 2 or 3 times to learn. You've still got the people there, but you're going to make a difference when you get it right and learn fast.
So how rapid should a rapid RPA be?
I thought 3 to 4 months was pretty good, actually. Would you like to cut that down? I mean, I thought 5 processes in that time, from having nothing, having no infrastructure, nothing at all, is not bad. I thought that was pretty good. Now, we didn't, as I said, do everything in every process, but we've got a plan of how we now flesh that out. But we have learnt so much.
So I will ask a selfish question here.
Yes.
What role would you see a consulting firm would play in rapid RPA?
I think the helping to cut through that hype and the many coffee meetings we've had, so we can get clarity of what processes, the ordering of the processes, what to leave for now, was really important to us. So it's as much about what you don't do as what you do if you're going to take this approach.
So I will just mix up the questions in a random order, because we have covered most of the questions during your journey in the presentation. What did you not know when you started that you wish you would had?
Everything. I think even though I say the people change management is incredibly important, I still think at the beginning we underestimated it. But we rapidly recovered from that. The robots are easy to manage. You can name them, you can do whatever you want, but it's the people that are hard to get to go on this journey. And it's no different to any other change management. The impervious layer is the middle management. It's not the field. The field can see what can be done and how their jobs can be better and their lives enriched quite easily. But you get the middle management layer, which are the impervious ones, and they're the ones you really need to work on. So I wish I'd known that.
So I will also ask you one question about the business case, which we have put very fast, is that I will also ask this poll to the audience that what are your views on treatment of setup cost and scripting? Are they should be capitalized, or they should be charged as operating expense, or they should be amortized over 2 years?
Right.
What you did and why?
Okay, so the setup costs, and this will come down to each company's financial policies as well, so you can't necessarily change those, but the setup costs we capitalise over 5 years. Being in infrastructure and construction, it's a very normal way of thinking, may not necessarily be normal elsewhere. The licence fees for the first year could be capitalised, but then they become an ongoing cost. They are an annual cost. The cost of actually automating the process needs to be netted against the benefit of the process. I think there is logic in lumping processes together, because in some cases we have processes which we are automating, which we don't actually do today. So if you look at vendor reconciliations, we were only doing a certain number of vendors. This gives us the opportunity to do a lot more vendors that we weren't even doing. So if you lump the processes together, then you get some of the cost of automating that process put in a bucket.
So one thing, the polling is still going ahead, and I would like to understand the maintenance cost. They should be operationalized, charged for the year, or what are you using that?
Well, I mean, this comes down to our financial policy. Everything gets retained in the project for a year. So even phase 1, we will have that for a year in the project cost, and we will declare it as a project cost. Then after a year, it moves to what we call a run cost. So it goes into a normal budget cycle. So it's considered part of running the business.
So I will just try to share the results of the poll which we have done. 11% think it should be capitalized. 47% think it should be operating expense, and 42% think it should be amortized over 2 years. So I think it depends upon each organization's view of treating the expenses of this nature over 2 years or 1 year. Because I'm also a CA, and anything which gives you benefit beyond one accounting period should be capitalized or amortized. I think it again depends what's the quantum, because you will see the pricing of the bots coming down very fast. So currently, as per the accounting standards, anything below 5K should be done on the same year. So you'll see that treatment changing, how it goes ahead the next couple of years. And now the RPA is launching a cloud-based solution, which will change again the whole capital and operating debate. So coming back to your question and answers, I would like to understand more about what will be your tips for new starters? What have been your experience for new starters and established players? I have seen established players running it for last 9 months and still only one POC. So what are some tips for them?
Look, you live in the culture you live in, so you need to work within the framework of the company that you're in. It depends on the appetite for risk for a certain extent in a company, and how willing they are to move quickly and to learn from failures. So you've got to read that dynamic. There's no point in trying to do rapid RPA in a company that just doesn't relate to that. So I'm fortunate that I can. If you have the luxury of trying to influence the direction, I would definitely go this way. I think you can show early results, even if it's break even, like us on 5 processes, that's a good outcome in 6 months. There aren't too many business cases that do that, and then in the next 6 months you actually have a benefit. That's pretty good. So I would do it this way if you have the luxury, but be very careful what processes you pick, and use the experience of whoever you can around you to make sure that you pick the processes that matter to the business, but don't break the business.
So Lee, I will ask one. You have answered already how do you get offshore providers to do RPA, but who owns the benefit of that RPA?
Well, that's interesting because that does get back to some of the contractual frameworks that are out there. So we are progressively moving away from FTE-based contracts, as are many companies, to outcome-based contracts. In RPA, that's really important because it means that both parties get an opportunity to share in the fruits of RPA. I think that's really important. If you've got an offshore provider and all they can see is as they RPA, their FTEs come down and their revenue come down, then that's probably not what I would call a win-win situation. So it's really hard when a supplier, and I've been a supplier, so I know that's a really hard model to be in. Think about how you get into a more partnership model that there's something in it for the supplier, and that might, for many companies be the same as us, that there are currently processes that haven't been RPA'd, that aren't outsourced, that aren't offshored, that you can work on together. So the current processes that they have, it's a given. You would expect them to RPA that. That's the latest technology. And I would hope in the future they become proactive, but then find other ways of getting a win-win. And I think that's the best way you can do that. Give them more, and you get the benefit and they get the benefit.
So Lee, last question, keeping in with the time which we have got, is that what is your vision? Currently you have one tool set. This tool set might evolve, might eliminate, might be acquired by somebody, bigger organization. So how you're preparing your organization? So what is your vision for certainness about what your organization will do in next 6 months, 9 months, or 18 months?
Yeah, that's true because the market will have to settle. There's a lot of players out there, and there will probably be mergers and acquisitions that go on. We chose what I think is relatively safe, vanilla software because of that. There are some out there that are more what I've called fringe dwellers. They're very creative, but they don't fit our culture in terms of how they want to do changes to their software. So we're pretty much in the safe area, I think. Where we want to go is this software will develop. It's at the beginning now. So that as the enhancements come along, as we get software that's better able to handle unstructured data, that will be a real breakthrough. Deploying artificial intelligence solutions more into our business. I mean, we're really interested in that we use a lot of physical robots today. So people relate to physical robots, and I bring along a software robot and say, I can't see that, So, but more and more, we will find that as the industry matures, there'll be smarter solutions. And sometimes you'll throw away what you've done and use something else because it's better. That's okay. This is not expensive stuff that we're doing. For all things in technology, this is relatively cheap. It's not like we're throwing away an enterprise system. If we code something and we find that there's a better way of doing it, then you'll be able to do it.
I think, Lee, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate very insightful information which we have got today from your journey and experience. I think it's very valuable because there is no string attached to your sharing of the knowledge. You're not a consulting firm. You're giving your real hands-on experience. Yeah. This is very valuable, and we can see the number of attendants today we have got for this webinar. At least 80% are from US. Which is about 8 o'clock in the night there, and it's Christmas time. They're still on the webinar. So I think they do love to hear more from you. And we have not answered all the questions because of the constraint of time. And I will request the participant, if they have any questions, we can ask Lee. She is going for Christmas break, but not for a long time. And she will be back. So I think any questions you have, please feel free to send to us, and we'll ask Lee to answer them. And she has been quite kind enough to come to this webinar. We really appreciate the time she has given to us for this webinar and her insights. We thank you, Lee. And I hope all of the audience and participants have the same gratitude and feeling towards Jubilee. We hope to hear you soon again on our webinar with your next experience, which will be much more rapider than this rapid journey.
In weeks.
In weeks. Thank you very much, Lee and audience, for this webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. We will share this slides and all the webinar recording with you shortly. Do let us know how can we improve. Our next topic of webinar is how to set COE for RPA. I think Lee will be also involved in that if she is want to discuss her insights there. And I think I've also get a couple of senior executives who have taken this journey already on COE setup. Thank you very much and enjoy your Christmas, Happy New Year, and speak to you soon in the new year. Thank you, bye.